had a tiny fight turn into a big problem?
I haven't the slightest idea what you're talking about.
I'm Emily Gough, a relationship coach. I've spent years exploring how we connect to grow and heal in love. To me, love is both a mirror and an opportunity. It asks us to face ourselves honestly and to choose courage over comfort.
And I'm Gardner, an embodied leadership coach and communications consultant. Love isn't theory, it's practice. How we speak, listen, and show up when it really matters. So every week we coach couples, and what we share here is what we use in the room.
Together, we invite you into our real-life relationship, including the conflicts, the breakthroughs, and tools we use with other couples.
Our dance is simple. You move towards me, and
you tend to move away.
I think I call that strategically retreating.
I think that they call that relationship code for hiding in YouTube.
Some episodes we dive into our story, heartbreaks, laughter, and lessons. Others break down the practices and conversations we use with couples, sometimes even with our live clients.
This is Love in Practice.
Let's grow this.
Welcome back to Love in Practice. And we're going to continue taking you on this journey that we have undergone of taking you back to where we've been and bringing you back to the present day where we are and the very real challenges that we have both undergone and are currently undergoing. And right before we just started recording, we actually listened to what we are airing as episode 3 on this podcast. It actually aired originally on my podcast, Room to Grow. And it's the very first episode that we started talking about our relationship and coming out publicly with the fact that we were together and taking you through what had transpired so far and the long distance relationship that we were in, going back and forth here to Canada. And we kind of did like 1 month on, 1 month off. And it was really interesting to listen to that episode where we are now and just to really... We've got some thoughts, and we haven't discussed this beforehand, by the way. We both listened to it. We haven't had a conversation about what we heard. We're just diving right into it. You're hearing things in real time.
Real time, guys. Let's hope this goes well. I'm sure it will.
Yes. So tell me something that you heard in that episode.
Well, I think the first thing that pops out is just, being able to hear yourself, early in young love, and I think there's 2 things that pop out. One is just the energy in the conversation. Right? Yeah. There's a quality of just giddiness. I mean, your laugh is infectious, and you guys are going to hear it quite a bit throughout this episode. But it was just on full tilt. There was just a smiling and a joy that is just so indicative of that honeymoon phase that none of us want to admit that we're in this honeymoon phase, right? It's like, oh no, this is just how it's going to be. This is how it's always going to be. And there's still a fair amount of that kind of laughter. It's just, the degree of it, that there was so much of just the energy behind it, as well as, what you don't know until you know that you don't know it. If that makes any sense. And there were so many things in the episode that, it felt like there was clarity, that we had worked through these things, that we were completely on the other side, that we absolutely understood how that worked out, and it was over. And, and here we are today, still working through some of those things, sometimes in a different way, sometimes in very similar ways. And I think that I don't know if any of you guys have the opportunity to look back on, if you're in a long-term relationship, to look back on, the early days and think back like, yeah, I really believed that. I really believed that this was going to be easy, that this was worked through, that I think that was the thing that really stuck out to me as a overall, and just looking back, it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. So this is it's going to be episode 3 that you hear this episode. So if you want to skip ahead, listen to that one, and then come back and listen to this one to get our thoughts, feel free.
Oh no, I think you're going to want to hear the rest of this one. Trust me. And then you're going to really want to hear that one. But so tell me, what did you notice as you listened to that episode?
there was something of an innocence. And to your point, I was kind of laughing at the same thing, even right near the end of the episode. We were talking about how we had worked through something and how quickly we moved through it. And we did that particular layer, but there have been more layers of some of those same things that came up in new ways. I also really, I was reminded, and this is scientifically backed, that for any couple to go back and revisit the early days of their relationship, even if it's just in conversation, you don't have to record a podcast in order to do that. It's really powerful as a reconnection and a rebonding. And I felt that in rehearing that episode, re-listening to that episode, because there were so many beautiful things that one thing I'm really proud of is that I think a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, I don't take you for granted. And I really do genuinely appreciate every day. Sometimes I am brought to tears still on a regular basis at your generosity to me and your generosity just with the humans around you in general and out in the world. And it was really beautiful to hear that previous version of me, just really noticing that about you, but really learning it for the first time. And it was a really beautiful reminder. And we were out for a walk part of the time while we were re-listening to this episode, just on speaker while we were walking. And I looked over at you a few times and I'm like, oh, I just love him. So there really is that too. And I've never stopped loving you as much as I did then. In so many ways, I really do love you even more because I do know you more. And we just continue to deepen. And I have seen some of the even messier parts and I still choose you. And, but there were certainly particular issues that we touched on without necessarily going really deep into in that podcast that have come up again in new ways, even relatively recently, that caused a lot of friction for us. And some of those things around co-parenting and blended families, we will get into in this season. I think that actually season 2 is going to have a much deeper focus on exclusively some of those things because it's a very broad topic. There's a lot of angles to cover with it. But that is certainly something that has presented more issues than I think either one of us potentially anticipated, particularly me having not had children or ever done that before. You had done that before, blended a family, and I hadn't. So it has been particularly new for me.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the things that we saw. Let's get into some of the particulars that we can point out. I'll speak first and say that something that I thought was really interesting. I talk in this episode about the difference between caregiving and caretaking, and it's something that I had a realization in previous relationships and patterns that I really thought that I'd worked through, and noticing how it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You think you've worked through this episode, you've worked through this, and as I was talking in that relationship, about the importance of building trust, coming into this relationship with a lot of things that you didn't necessarily believe or things that you were skeptical about, and feeling a real responsibility to put your nervous system at ease, to create a pattern where you could see that this is who I really was, and a lot of things that I took on early in the relationship that in retrospect, I question whether or not that was a repetition of the same pattern of wanting to be wanted and doing what I do so well, which is taking care of you, or taking care of the fears, the concerns that you had coming up, whether it was related to past experiences and past traumas, or just questioning what was happening currently in this relationship, and early on creating, I think in a way that was my way of love bombing. My way of love bombing was being like, yeah, I got you. No matter what, I'll address those fears. I'll sit with them. I'll work through them. And then, it got to a certain point, and can't say exactly when this happened, but I'm sure for you, it felt like it was overnight and immediate, that I was just like, you know what, I'm tired of putting these fears to bed and putting these fears to rest. I think I've demonstrated that I'm a trustworthy person, and that's not who I am. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to prove to you that I am that person. And a wall came down. And that wall created a lot of division that I didn't see. And, when I listen back to that, I hear myself engaging in some of those patterns around caretaking that then I'm sure for you felt like a massive blow when, I withdrew from that stance and said, you know what, that's not necessarily healthy for me to continue doing that. So curious what that brings up for you as I say that. And, if you saw that or if you see any other patterns in that episode.
Yeah. I definitely noticed that too in the episode. And you're right. And I also don't remember, I think that looking back, I think that it had started to be a little bit more of a slow erosion of you putting up boundaries around that, but I wasn't quite fully getting it until one day it did kind of feel like, and unfortunately, you didn't choose a great moment to put up that wall for me, like for my nervous system. And it's I don't blame you for it at all, because I think for you, it had been such a gradual thing that when you did finally put up the wall, it just happened to be at a time where I was feeling particularly vulnerable. I'd been experiencing a lot of heart palpitations for a week. I thought there was something seriously wrong. I thought I might have some sort of heart condition. And I was looking to you for comfort, and you were just not really responding. You were just kind of being silent. And I was having a hard time. And there's additional context around this in terms of health insurance. I am very unfamiliar with the American health system. All those things, there's a lot of stress around that.
Side note, for Americans, Canadians are terrified of the American. I've been learning this in our marriage, is and Europeans as well. They are absolutely terrified of getting sick in America.
We are used to a very socialist system.
Yeah. Yes. So, contributing factors.
Yes, there were very much contributing factors.
Along with moving here, being a new country, a lot of uncertainty, environment, and uncertainty of, connection, feeling isolation.
Yeah.
Quite a few things on top of that as well.
Oh, yeah. There were, just to give a very, thank you for bringing that up, because that was a huge part of the compiling and compounding list of fears that I was experiencing. When I moved here, I expected there to be no real issue. I was already very familiar with Asheville. I loved Asheville. I wanted to move to Asheville. I was so excited. I was so excited to move in with you. And then literally as we arrived here together, I started panicking. And I was like, oh my God, have I made the right choice? And I felt like I was falling apart a little bit. And then I also went from 0 to 2 kids overnight. And it felt like I'd been punched in the face. I was like, what? I don't know how to do this. No one trained me how to do this. Like, yes, I'd already built up a great relationship with them before I got here, but I felt like I didn't really have much freedom. I didn't have my own car yet. There was so many factors. I missed my mom. I couldn't leave the country once we started the green card process. So I wasn't able to go home to see my family. There were so many things. Then this health issue comes up and you were kind of silent. And I got upset, and you then, I don't remember exactly what you said, but you put a boundary in place around me needing to step up and take more leadership, essentially. And I'm massively paraphrasing there, but and I freaked out a little bit, because I was like, this is a moment where I actually really need to know that you care, particularly because I feel very alone right now. I feel very isolated. I don't even know necessarily how to navigate getting myself help right now in this exact moment with this system that I don't really understand. And I needed you. And that really, we had a long conversation about that after the fact. And I think that you kind of started to understand that maybe wasn't the best moment in time to put up that wall. But in terms of you setting the boundary, there was nothing wrong with that. It just, for me, I had a harder time with that exact moment.
Well, I think what this illustrates is that, two people can be having two very different experiences.
Oh, yeah.
In that moment, it was about two very different things for each of us, right? And it's often really difficult in relationship to separate what it's meaning for me to what it's meaning for you. So for me, a lot of the doubting of the failure to feel good here was a lot about related back to me as doubting me and doubting this relationship, right? And so it was very difficult sometimes to extricate myself from the experience that you were having and the experience that I was having that was being directed towards me in that moment, right? And that's where it gets so difficult in relationship, right? When we're blending two relationships together, to be able to separate and say, okay, this person is going through this thing right now. And this thing is not about me per se. This is what they're going through. And I can be present for the thing that they're going through, the challenges, the fears, the struggles that they're going through, and not make it about me. Compounding with that, oftentimes there are a lot of ways that we go about communicating these things that contribute to the belief that it's about me, that this is,
It's hard not to feel that way. It's really difficult to create that separation. Very difficult. Yeah.
I think that is one of the big challenges that is a part of this second stage of relationship of how do I accept your truth and your reality, give value to that truth and that reality while not diminishing my own truth and my own reality. Like that is
it's a balance.
Such a difficult skill.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that for me, that is that's the air that I breathe, that I was born and raised into. I'm multiracial. I come from two very different worlds. And from a very early age, I was having to navigate those two worlds and try to make sense out of how both of these two groups of people that I love dearly and could not be more different. How could they both coexist in their same reality? And so that's really something that's been interesting to me to really dive into that. How can, we talk about in this episode 3, a lot about, all needs being met. How can we navigate this in a way that your needs are valuable, my needs are valuable, but accepting these somewhat disparate realities?
And I do think that while all needs get to be met, it doesn't necessarily come without sacrifice. In some instances.
Yeah, right. And that's a good one.
Yes.
Sacrifice. So tell me more. So when you say sacrifice, what do you mean by that in sacrifice? Because this is a good one. This is a really good one because it's, compromise, sacrifice. Are they the same thing for you? And are both needed? Are some needed in one time and another in another?
I think that sacrifice implies giving something up to me. It doesn't necessarily mean forever. And compromise can, again, this is just my personal view on it. Compromise can mean that both people give something up to meet in the middle. And yet there are certain instances, and I'll give an example. So recently we had it come up about you suggesting changing our schedule with our younger son. And I had some big feelings around that because to me, it seemed that we were not really ever going to get a full weekend again. Right now we have every other weekend totally free. It was going to mean that we had at least a small portion of each weekend with our little guy. And it was never about him to me. It was about me. It was about me. For context, I'm also an only child. Actually, technically, so are you, although you do have half siblings. So it is sometimes.
They're full siblings.
I know. I only ever say that just to differentiate that, like, by technicality, it's actually two only children in relationship with each other, which is interesting because only children, historically, stereotypically, it's like the world kind of revolves around me. Like, what do you mean the world doesn't revolve around me? This is shocking information for me. And I've often been told I'm very good at, meeting people more so than other only children that they have met. But that doesn't mean that there aren't still, of courses built into me that I'm not necessarily conscious of, where it's like, well, what do you mean it's not about me? Like, of course this is about me. And I was struggling with that. And you and I had a couple really, really difficult conflicts around that particular issue. But what I actually came to and shared with you just a few days ago, literally, guys, you're getting this in real time, basically, is I wanted, and not out of a place of silencing myself, not out of a place of me not having an opinion or not feeling considered, I wanted to offer to make an agreement with you rather than you having to hold a really hard boundary line in the sand, that was a decision that you needed to make around the arrangement of when we have him. Was, can I offer you my full trust in leading this family in those types of decisions? And I was unwilling to offer you that until I really sat with that, because I was like, there are going to be times where this is not convenient for me. There are going to be times where I may not like what you are suggesting. And it doesn't mean that I won't have an opinion. We will still have discussions about it. But me trying to control that particular outcome out of underneath it, a fear of what it would mean for me, or a set of fears of what it would mean for me, can I instead trust, because I have a lot of evidence in this relationship to back up that I can trust that things have a way of working themselves out in life in general, in my own life, and in our relationship. And I married a deeply trustworthy man. And I realized that there have been times where I have not always extended you the respect that goes with that trust. And I really wanted to offer you that. And I needed to be sure within myself. I'm like, I'm only going to give this if I can really stand behind this. And sometimes that will mean making sacrifices as opposed to making compromises.
So what do you think what in there is the sacrifice? I just want to land this.
It's really a projection of potential sacrifice. So it's me sharing that with you is not the sacrifice. Me standing behind that in moments where it's not convenient for me, so that is the potential for me needing to make a sacrifice.
So we're saying like sacrificing control, sacrificing the decision making. Like what do you see as the core element of the sacrifice there? I just want to kind of land the plane for the people listening, as we're trying to kind of work through this, because I think a lot of people out there listening, wrestle with this question of, what does a sacrifice really mean? And is that always the most loving decision for myself? And so I'm really trying to wrestle with this idea of sacrifice as you see it. And I think this is, as we're working this out in real time, guys, this is also about having shared language. A lot of times we're having conversations or disagreements.
We tease all the time.
Yeah, and we're using a word that means a different thing to us independently.
So we're like, what does that mean to you? So, like literally, what does that exact word mean to you?
Yeah, so I'm really trying to dig under this and understand better. So, what do you feel is what is it? When I hear sacrifice, I'm choosing to let go of something that I've been holding on to. And so, could you clarify for me what do you feel that is, or if that's correct for you? Yeah,
and now I'm almost questioning: is sacrifice the right word? Maybe it isn't, but To me, it's perhaps more surrendering. In terms of surrendering control. I'm not sacrificing control. I'm surrendering control and surrendering fear, letting it go, all of those things. In terms of sacrifice, just again, for this very specific example of like sacrificing, having every other weekend totally without kids. And am I sacrificing myself in that? No, I can go do something else. So that type of sacrifice doesn't need to mean self-abandonment. I could make it mean self-abandonment either by the story I create around it or by the action that I then follow through with by, oh, well, then I have to stay home every other weekend or whatever. Like that's self-induced. You don't require that from me. You are not asking that of me. That would be self-abandonment. And that's not something that I consciously or willingly participate in this stage of my life any longer. So it's a choice that I get to make. So the sacrifice is more about what I make it mean in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think there's this space of choosing that, and it can get very close to falling into a martyr position.
Yes.
Right. When there's this, pattern of, okay, I'll do it for everybody else.
Which is one of my historical and familial patterns that has been passed down to me that I have often fallen into the trap of myself. Yes.
And so I get weary of that. I get concerned about that word when somebody comes to me and says, I'm making this sacrifice. And is that something that I'm choosing out of love or something I'm doing out of a sense of obligation?
And that
piece, right?
That, because when you framed that to me, I don't think we haven't talked about that. You're going to get all kinds of this on this podcast where we're literally having conversations like, oh, we never actually have talked about this. When we had that conflict and you framed it to me as, are you participating in things like family dinners or whatever due to love, like out of love or out of obligation? Because if you're participating out of obligation, that doesn't feel good. And I really sat with that. And the majority of the time it was out of love. It had started to feel sometimes out of obligation though. And I started really paying close attention to that. And I'd already been a little bit aware of it before you brought it up and had started removing myself from some of those just to go off and fill my own cup and do my own thing. But that brought it into much clearer awareness when you pointed out to me, you wouldn't love me any less. You would actually, in a lot of ways, frankly, love me even more because like, oh my God, like I get this like filled up version of you rather than these underlying resentments that come from you showing up for something that you feel obligated to do because that doesn't feel like love to me. And that put what I had already been trying to focus my energy into more crystal clear awareness that I have been operating from since. And I have felt the difference.
That's beautiful. And I say that I think because for me, it was really about finding compromise. I mentioned this the other night of this, I come from an acting background, was in teaching improvisational theater for my early 20s. And, in improvisation, there's a game of yes and. And for me, compromise is a game of yes and. It's okay, you want this and I want this. Right. And how can we work together to kind of find that, And so for me, I'll be really transparent here that I've been working through recovery. I've been working through marijuana addiction and recovery. And so that conversation was about having a conflict between my time with my child and my time to go to my recovery meetings. And so, I was saying, hey, this is something that's really important to me. I want to do this. And I can understand if this is going to create a challenge or a conflict, but can you come back to me with something that would help you meet this? Okay, well, if you got to do that, then I need to go out and do this at this point in time, right? I need this, you need this kind of thing, as opposed to a no. And that's what I think for me, that's where I come back to this space of, do I need to make a sacrifice? Do I need to see it as a sacrifice? Or is it just two humans trying to find a way to acknowledge that, okay, this is really important for you. I see that. And this is something that's coming up that's going to be impacted for me. And this is really important for me. And I want to put this on the table, and I want this to be seen and valued just as much as this thing is seen and valued. And it's not a quid pro quo where I'm doing this for you, so you got to do this for me. It's just like, hey, this is important for me, and this is also important for me. And so how do we compromise in that? And is sacrifice essential, or is it just a perspective that I'm holding on to or have believed in, or holding necessarily a story around, that this is the way that it needs to be for me, and if I have to let that go, then I'm cutting off an arm, or I'm cutting off a limb, or I'm cutting something off in order to meet you in that. And certainly there are going to be places where, there are big things that come up in relationship, where it's going to feel, and I'm putting air quotes around feel, because big feelings come up. Big feelings come up when this part of me is challenged in this particular way. And I'm going to have to wrestle with what's underneath those big feelings. What's really there, and how do I move through those so that I can still be present with the person that's in front of me that I love.
And, just to give additional context with that too, these are things that we'll end up talking about kind of ongoing, these themes around shame that can come up in relationship, and grandiosity. We'll get into that and more of what that means and stuff too. But something that I also felt an enormous amount of shame around with that was the fact that I even had big feelings around this when you were, I'm like, of course you should be able to switch this schedule around, particularly given the reasons that you have around wanting to. And I felt like a total monster that I was having such big feelings around this. And that also came at the end of 14 months straight of not having a break, of going from moving here and then having at least one child 100% of the time. To go from, I spent my first 37 years being childless, and I love your boys, and I continue to love them more every day because they bring so much into my life. And to go from 0 to 100 overnight without the break. So this came at the very end of those 14 months when we had also had a particularly grueling summer camp schedule, and I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. And then you very casually brought this to me because you didn't see it as a big deal. And I shared with you later, it felt like I was dying. It was so overwhelming. It was the straw that was breaking my back. And then I took a trip for a week. I went back to Canada because I got my green card. I was able to leave the country and stuff. And I felt like a completely different human. It felt like a weight that I didn't even know I'd been carrying came off, and then I had clarity.
As I said, we're working through these things in real time right in front of you. And so I really want to thank my beautiful wife for even agreeing to have these very challenging and beautiful questions. And I want to really celebrate your heroism. There's a better word for that. I realize that hero, I think that implies man. Anyways, in continuing to have and, opening conversations, because I know that for you, something that's of course, and it's built into your family system is, keeping these things close to the heart. And being really private about that. And I think that that's a sign of our growth together. So I want to celebrate that. Is there anything else, to just pivot for a second, is there anything else that kind of stuck out for you in that episode, looking back on where we were then, where we are now, and some of the anything that stuck out to you and just was like, oh man, look at that.
I think the long distance, because the long distance came with a lot of challenges, even more so for me than for you. I also just, because I came to you much more often just because of the boys and everything else, it just made so much more sense logistically. And I wanted to be here anyway. So I was the one who was also, I felt like I was living two different lives. We would kind of go 1 month on, 1 month off. And it's like I would just get settled and, comfortable here and really getting into day-to-day life here in a different routine. And then I would go back to Canada and I felt completely discombobulated. And then I would just finally kind of get back into routine there. And it was time to come back here again. And that was starting to feel really hard. And of course, just missing you and stuff as well. But I also think that there were a lot of upsides in terms of having that built-in separation and then coming back together again. That's where erotic energy can be cultivated so much more and stuff too. And just that missing each other, that separation that actually creates more togetherness. Then I moved here and then we spent way too much time together for our first 14 months here. And part of it was logistical, like having one vehicle. And then there was, we both work from home. There were a number of different challenges that led to us being together all the time.
A natural disaster.
Casually having a natural disaster, like, not having power and water for weeks on end, evacuating to a different state and then coming back and then going back again. It was just, there was a lot going on. Then you had the revelation about addiction. Mm-hmm. And you can talk about that more now if you want to, but we may save that for another episode. And there was a lot. Mm-hmm. There was a lot. And we were together so much of the time and just not having much of a community here. Then going into winter, it was like everyone went into their hidey holes. It was harder to build community. A lot of Asheville had shut down because of the hurricane as well. So there just weren't even as many opportunities to go out and meet people. It was heavy. It was really, really heavy. And it has only been more recently that I in particular have started to put certain things in place where I am exiting the house much more often because we're also both introverted homebodies, which is so problematic sometimes when, there's too much togetherness. And now we have to be super intentional about creating more separateness so that we can come back together and miss each other.
Yeah. It's interesting though, that I think that it's, I think my judgment is that you're someone that really thrives in structure. You really like to have it like laid out, I needed this, this. Mm-hmm. And I thrive in chaos. I love when everything changes. I love when the table gets knocked over. When I was in my 20s and I was an actor, I used to get bored on stage until something went wrong. And then suddenly I'd light up and I was like, oh, something's changing. I'm not doing the same thing today. And, I've always sought out careers that have, given me the opportunity to do something different every day. And so early in our relationship, when we were a month on, month off, that was great for me. Like I'm doing this thing intensely for a month and I'm doing this thing intensely for a month. And I'm doing this thing intensely for a month. And, throw in a natural disaster. I'm like, yo, I'm made for this. Like, fall off a cliff, break my back. All right, let's do this. That was that.
You broke a rib, but yes.
Rib, yes. But that was in the middle of it, so there was, in some ways I felt more comfortable in the back and forth changing of the schedule. Not that it was, not that I preferred having a long distance relationship, but I liked that kind of, on again, off again, really intense, completely cold. I thrived in that. And that wasn't something that I think that you really, you tolerated and you appreciated it. And you'll talk a lot in that next episode about, how we were really able to grow through our communication. But I think that's another piece of the differences that we're having to navigate now, as it becomes even more clear that we're different in our rhythms of life. Whether it's getting up in the morning or it's going to bed at night, or it's just the constant changes. I joke a lot that the only reason I can stay in this house is I have to move all the furniture every 3 months.
Oh, and he literally does 3 months. It's like 3 weeks. Like and it's often like we'll do it together too. Like you'll all of a sudden one day you're like, okay, we're doing it. I'm like, okay, we're doing this tonight. All right. But then sometimes like I'll leave and I come back to like a different house. But you tell me what's happening. It's just I haven't seen it yet, and I come back and like half the house has moved around. But I love it, actually. I really do love that, and I have learned more and more that you don't want to change wives. You're very consistent about that, but then all the other things need to change in order to give you something exciting.
Yeah. Whereas, I think you've come to appreciate it, but at first it's like, where's everything? What happened? And so again, that's, part of blending these borders. Going back to the core premise of what we're looking at this season is what are the of courses that are baked into our system, and how we work. And, I think everyone is looking for that partner where they don't have to challenge their of courses. Where it's like, oh, this person likes change. I like change. This person likes going hiking. I like going hiking. This person likes to eat salmon on Fridays. I like to eat salmon on Fridays. Oh, this is going to be so great. We like the same things.
How we bond is over the similarities.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't bond over differences of people. We bond over similarities.
But we grow through the differences.
Yes.
And that's really the challenge, right? That's what we signed up for. I think, and it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable a lot of time to recognize, the different ways that we go about things, and to find value in the different ways that we go about things. I know in this episode, this first episode, I talk about, masculine, feminine polarity, and, what I call masculine and feminine integrity, and how there's value to both. And I'm listening to that going, oh, I said that? Really? I said that? So I'm in this conversation lately. I'm like, it's not feeling, it's science, people. It's not feelings, it's science, okay? I don't know how you feel about that traffic jam, but the science would say the traffic jam is because of this, and this, right?
We just had this conversation with his mom over lunch today.
Rehashing these things.
Real time, guys, real time.
Real time. And those are like core differences, that we say we appreciate on the outside. It's like, oh, you're such a feeling person. You're so alive and so vibrant, and I love your feelings. And then I really don't like your feelings. I'll be honest, a lot of times I don't like your feelings.
And I love your logic until I really don't like that you can only make a logical argument to me and you can't understand how I feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
And isn't this, this is like even the couples we work with, this comes up in every single couple we work with is this. And usually it tends to be more the feminine partner, the big feelings. But trust me, guys, men have big feelings too. Like,
absolutely,
you are such a sensitive soul that I don't think I have at times given you enough credit for that. And I really have started to come deeper into understanding of that. And I hope to just continue to deepen that understanding in practice, love and practice. And
you are clearly a very logical person. I don't want to diminish the intelligence and the logic. And you'll notice that she'll bring up that there's scientific evidence for this on a regular basis. And so the places where it's difficult and where it's inconvenient is where I think it should be a logical decision and you think it should be an emotional decision, or, vice versa. And then it becomes really inconvenient. Because ultimately, and this is my judgment as well, is I think we're both experiencing that there's a lack of opening for each other in the perspective that we're holding. I believe that if the choice is being made around the feelings, then, well, I can't argue. There's no space for me to have any conversation around that. There's no compromise because this is just a feeling, and there's nothing that can be done about that.
Whereas I feel that you make the logical argument and you make it so airtight that it would stand up in a court of law, and that there's no room for my feelings, and then I feel like I don't matter and that you don't care. And that this is the thing. This can also come down to, like freedom and connection and stuff too. But it's not always tipped one way or the other. Again, like there are times where I have been the one who has held fear around feeling like my freedom is restricted. Not because you're actually restricting it, but just circumstantially, I have felt like, ooh, like that constriction. Sometimes you are very much, and you even more than me, tend to be the one who is feeling that constriction sometimes. And it's about the ebb and the flow and then the connection. And it's all this back and forth and this duality that it's finding the balance between it. And where is the balance? The balance isn't always going to look the same with everything either. It's very context dependent.
Okay, I got an idea. All right. You are on the outside looking in on this relationship, right? We are one of our clients, right? What would you say to one of our clients that is in this situation? If we're putting ourselves outside of ourselves for a second, what's something that you would offer either to the man, to the woman, to both, whichever direction you want to take this, that would say, hey, this is something that I see that you can work on. This is a practice that you might want to engage in to really deepen your love and your connection and the growth to the relationship you want to have.
The first thing that's coming to mind is to put the armor or the sword or whichever, both, to put it down a little more often, and to be able to recognize that and I'm trying to make this applicable in a little bit of the broader sense. So in terms of the logic versus emotion, logic versus feeling.
Yeah. And just to clarify, when you see this, like what's the thing that you see that you would want to, and I'm just kind of helping them to understand this, like what's the part of this that you see that you would really want to approach, and then how would you approach it? Well,
I think that it's, if you acknowledge my feelings, what are you making that mean? And if I acknowledge your logic, I know that there have been times where I have, and somewhat subconsciously, not wanted to acknowledge your logic, because if I do, my fear is that then I won't matter anyway. My feelings won't matter anyway. And I still won't get any closer to getting my need met. It will then just be all about you. So then I fight hard, because there are parts of me that feel that they're going to be abandoned if I don't continue to fight you. And can there be a little bit more trust on both sides? I'm just using myself as an example here. Can there be a little bit more trust? But this trust can only develop if both sides do this. So if I choose to do that, but then I'm met with my fear of you not actually, you're going, okay, well then I won the argument, which you wouldn't do. That's not how you roll. But then it proves the fear that my feelings really didn't matter, because then you just, I'm not saying you, but the person on the other side would then just see that as a concession somehow. But if we're being truly relational, and if both parties can actually open enough to share from the heart and with some vulnerability. And I know that word doesn't necessarily always resonate for men in particular. That's not an issue for you, but just, if there's couples listening to this, that can sound a lot like weakness. And you can speak to that better than I can for the men. But the trust and the opportunity for reconnection is built when both sides can put the armor down and can actually meet the other without the fear that if I see them, if I acknowledge where they're at, if I acknowledge their argument, then I'm going to lose the argument.
So in practice, right, so what I'm hearing you say is that I'm going to hear what they're saying. I'm going to take in, I'm being presented with, this person's being presented with logic. And there's a fear that if I give into this logic, that I won't be met as well. Okay? And I will be abandoning myself in that. And so what I hear you saying is, I'm going to choose to let my guard down and take leadership in that way, and say, okay, I see this piece.
Because that is love in practice. That's asking yourself, am I acting from fear or am I acting from love? If I'm acting from fear, you can do that. Does that lead you to the result that you actually want? Does that lead you to being the person you want to become? That's how I look at it. Now, in heat of the moment conflict, do I always remember that question? No. So my bigger, perhaps what I should have started with in terms of actual practice of this, step away. Step away. Take a breath. Take 30 minutes. Let the other person know you're taking 30 minutes. You'll be back in 30 minutes. In my case, I needed to take a week.
Sometimes the big ones take a longer time.
No, we also, I also have gotten so much better at, you and I are both, I think, pretty good at this point at asking ourselves what energy is needed in this set of circumstances, in this situation, and being able to put a potential conflict aside for the sake of the family, for the sake of working together with a couple, whatever that is. So sometimes you're going to need to put a pin in it and then not just be pissed off and angry with them until you revisit it again. Can you genuinely, from a genuine place, come with the energy from a place of love, remembering that you do still love this person, even if you haven't figured it all out yet, and then come back to it and have resourced yourself enough to be able to put the armor down, because you might not be able to in the moment.
And what I hear you saying is also acknowledging what part of me is present in this conversation right now.
Yes.
And this is something that you guys will hear us talk a lot about. You mentioned in the last episode, Terry Reel, who's one of our teachers. And I really do believe in a lot of the work that he's done around this. And it's a lot of the backbone of the work that we do in acknowledging who is present. This is also something that you'll see in internal family systems, but really asking this core question of identifying my childhood wounding, and the adaptive child that has stepped in to protect me from that wounding, and the mature adult that I want to be present in this relationship. And when I'm feeling myself activated, and I think it's safe to say oftentimes when I'm acting from a place of fear, that fear is trauma. And that fear, that trauma is activating my adaptive child that wants to show up and keep me safe, and has done a really good job of keeping me safe. But that adaptive child is also the one that's protecting me from the relationships that I really want to have. And so what I hear you saying is it's stepping back and acknowledging, hey, this is not the mature adult that I want to be, that wants to be in this room at this time. And so being able to come back and say, as you did so magnanimously, that, hey, I really want to put this into the space. When you were able to come back, that's giving the space for the mature adult to come back to the relationship. And on both sides, we have to remember to bring that mature adult And the really difficult work is that two adaptive children cannot be in the same room at the same time. And
when they do, there are explosions.
absolutely. And when you guys, when you're off to the races, when those fights happen and it feels like you're barely even there, you aren't most of the time. Those are your adaptive children. Those are your
or
protectors.
teenagers.
Yeah, or adaptive teenagers.
Yes.
Those are the adaptive versions of ourselves that are protectors, that are protecting us from past hurts and the potential for future hurts. And so can we create the space to step back and make a decision that I'm not going to let you run this conversation. I'm not going to let this part of me run this conversation, because the mature adult has a whole other set of skills that is able to lean into trust, lean into love, lean into belief, not blindly, not just saying, hey, I'm going to give everything over, but it comes back to, hey, I'm willing to do this. And I want you to also know that my needs are here too. And my needs to get to be in this conversation. And that is a really valuable part of the conversation that needs to be had as well. And the mature adult is able to have that conversation. Yeah.
Was there anything else that you, as we're kind of wrapping up, got from the podcast episode 3, that you want to share?
Yeah, nothing else that comes to mind off the top. I'm not the one that remembers things that well. Getting up there in the age gas, I'm getting a little old over here. No, I do a better job of responding than I do of remembering what took place, even though we just listened to it a few hours ago. I think that, those were the overall big ones for me, is just, acknowledging where we, and I think we all think we've got it figured out. And then when I don't think, when I keep bumping my head up against something that I think I have figured out, it's easy to get down on myself and to question whether or not I was acting from my highest self, looking back and going, oh man, I thought I had it all figured out. I didn't have it figured out. Maybe I was wrong. And that question can trigger dominoes in a relationship, where you start going, well, I don't know. What else didn't I know? What else did I think I understood and I didn't understand? Was I too quick to rush into these absolute knowings? Where at an early stage, was I just deluded? Those kinds of questions. I think I would invite listeners to hear with open ears to themselves, not just to us, but to hear yourself in this. And I think at the end of the day, that's what, at the very best, each of us can really do in relationship. In our most mature adult, we can stop pointing the finger at them or her or him and just say, ooh, where do I see myself doing that? And in the future episodes, we're going to talk a little bit more about what you can do about that and how to build a practice for sustaining love that's enduring.
And the last thing I'll add to that is just that all of the healthiest relationships I know have undergone thousands of difficult conversations, building a nervous system that is willing and able to sit in the discomfort of love, not just the cozy, warm, wonderful parts, but the really hard moments, and sitting through that discomfort long enough to make it through to a different side of it. And also, every healthy relationship I know has gone through periods, sometimes several different seasons within it, of, oh my God, did I make the right choice? And I just want to normalize that, because it is human. Yeah. It is human. And I'm not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere.
You're not
either.
going anywhere. We fully are equipped, prepared, and for myself, excited to continue navigating this with you as my ride or die. And I'm not going anywhere, but it's really important that we get the Hollywood version, the rom-coms, where I talked about this in the book as well, where every Hollywood movie just about explores this thing where a couple undergoes some sort of hardship, you hit the climax, and then at the end of the movie, it's them essentially riding off into the sunset together. And that's the end of the movie. But that's the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
That's the point that I really want to underscore here.
Yeah, we do live in, and I think I mentioned this in our very first podcast, that we,
Before we'd ever even met in person.
Yeah, the idea of a patho-adolescent society, that we are stuck in adolescent approach to relationship, to community, to society. And, the adolescent version is I win the girl, and then that's it. Mm-hmm. I win the girl, I win the princess, and the story's over.
And I mean, the biggest problem with that is calling her a princess or thinking of her as a princess, but I'm just teasing.
The old Disney versions,
Yes.
The old Disney version of princess that we grew up with,
Yeah.
Maybe I grew up with a little bit more than you did because, I'm a lot older than you are.
Your age is showing. No, I did too, trust me.
But these stories and these ideas are the fabric of society that we rest upon. Mm-hmm. And they're so deeply embedded into our expectations of what a relationship is supposed to be. And whether we want to believe it or not, there's a part of each and every one of us that is waiting to ride off into the sunset. I even said this to my men's group the other day, is there is a part of me that thought that this was my sunset relationship, in the sense that I've already had my kids, I've already done all of these things, and this is just going to be the relationship that I ride off into the sunset with, right?
In terms of the smooth sailing.
Yeah, partially the smooth sailing, but this is my elder years relationship. This is the one that, we're going to be old sitting on the rocking chairs and, and smiling and not saying anything because there's nothing needs to be said anymore. But on some level, each and every one of us are looking for some version of that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge that for most of us, the full story was never told. And we get to really rewrite or write anew for the first time a story that we've never seen before. And even for those of you out there who said, my parents were great, they did it all perfectly and all of that. Sorry, they went through some hard stuff too. And whether or not you saw it, it's important for you to recognize that was a part of their journey as well. And encourage you to ask them about it if you don't know already.
And, I think that the sunset relationship still gets to happen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I believe in that.
Absolutely. So do I. And I believe in that with you. But you and I have often had conversations about the fact that there are very few, I don't know if there's many relationships that model exactly what you and I are looking to continue co-creating and where we're going. In some ways, it is a really interesting sign of the times that overall, I think that there's a lack of mentorship. Yeah, there's a lack of eldership. Yeah, and we are actively seeking out both examples of that, and I think as a society, we're desperately seeking that. Part of this journey, this great experiment of individualism, has lost a lot of the collective values. And I think collectively, I see a turning back to that. I think in these last couple of years, it's just me, but I think there's been
a huge turning back to God in many ways. That is an acknowledgement, I think I'm seeing of that, that there's something that's greater, that's important. There's a turning back to community and a need, especially after, the pandemic. We're recognizing how important it is to actually be in relationship with people in real time, in real life. Call me a socialist. But I think Jesus was a socialist. That's a whole other conversation for another time. Oh, did I get myself in trouble? Put it in the comments if you think I'm crazy. We'll see you on the next one as we journey through this great unfolding.
And love and practice.